Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Todd. I've worked in the software engineering business space for over 20 years. I've started out as an engineer. I'm currently an engineering manager. We're going to go over Scrum today. It's something that's been adopted quite a few years ago. I've been actually working in Scrum for about 7 years now. Before that, the most typical methodology that I used was actually Waterfall, and we'll be going over the compare and contrast to what Scrum is like, and then we'll contrast it a little bit with Waterfall, which was more the most common one for many years. It Waterfall is still sometimes used today, and there is times where that use case makes sense. But for most of your software engineering now, Scrum, I think, has been adopted. But this, especially if you're kind of new to maybe software engineering, maybe you're in the business, you don't really understand Scrum very well, or maybe it is a circumstance where your company is adopting Scrum, or maybe you just want to refresh your memory on all the details of Scrum, because we'll be going over everything ultimately here. This session is really just about the introduction to Scrum, but thank you for coming here. If you ever have any comments, remember to like them below. Please like and subscribe. Those things really help with the algorithm. Now let's get started. Scrum was developed in the 1990s by two pioneers in the Agile world, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. They were looking for a better way to manage and complete complex projects, and they realized that traditional linear approaches like Waterfall weren't cutting it anymore. They wanted a system that could adapt quickly to change and keep teams focused on delivering high value work, and that's exactly how Scrum was born. The core idea behind Scrum is to promote an iterative and incremental approach to work. Instead of trying to plan everything up front and sticking to rigid processes, Scrum encourages teams to work in small, manageable chunks called sprints. This way, teams can continuously review their progress, adapt to changes, and ensure they're always delivering the most value possible. What I love about Scrum is that it puts a strong emphasis on collaboration and efficiency. It's designed to bring people together, from developers to stakeholders, to ensure everyone is aligned with the goals and working towards the same vision. By focusing on frequent feedback and delivering small, usable increments, Scrum helps teams stay flexible while also keeping an eye on delivering the highest value products efficiently. It's a game changer for managing complex projects. And as we go deeper into the details of Scrum, you'll see how this framework empowers teams to collaborate better, iterate faster, and ultimately deliver higher quality products to their customers. Let's get started. Let's start with Waterfall, which has been a widely used method for decades. Waterfall is a linear, step by step process where you plan, execute, and then close the project. It's highly structured. Once you plan something, you stick to it, moving sequentially from one phase to the next. While the approach works well for projects with clear, unchanging requirements, it's less acceptable when things need change. The rigid nature of Waterfall means that if you discover an issue or if customer needs to evolve mid-project, you're often stuck with the original plan. In contrast, we have Scrum, which falls under the broader umbrella of Agile methodologies. Scrum takes an iterative and incremental approach. Instead of doing everything in one go, Scrum teams work in short cycles called sprints, where they plan, build, and review a small part of the project, then adapt based on feedback before moving forward. This allows teams to continuously improve, make adjustments, and stay aligned with customer needs. Scrum is all about adaptability, collaboration, and customer focus. You're not just following a rigid plan, you're working closely with the team, the stakeholders, to deliver value step by step. The key difference here is flexibility. While Waterfall locks you into a plan and limits your ability to pivot, Scrum is designed to adapt to change, keeping the customer's need to the forefront. This flexibility makes Scrum ideal for today's fast-paced and unpredictable business environments where customer demands and market conditions can shift quickly. So, if you're working on a project where change is likely, or if you want to ensure continuous improvement and collaboration, Scrum could be the right fit. Now, let's take a look at the pros and cons of both Waterfall and Scrum. So we're going to take a look at the pros and cons to both Scrum and Waterfall. So what you'll see here in this slide is you'll see the pros of Waterfall on the left and the pros of Scrum on the right. The next slide we'll go over the cons of each. Let's take a look at the pros of Waterfall first. Okay, now with Waterfall, there's a clear structure. Waterfall's linear process makes it easy to understand and follow. Each phase must be completed before the next one begins, providing a structured framework for teams. There's defined requirements. Since requirements are gathered up front, there's less ambiguity. This approach works well when the project has well understood requirements that aren't expected to change. Predictability. Waterfall provides clear timelines, budgets, and scope. This makes it easier for stakeholders to know what to expect. Documentation. When Waterfall emphasizes extensive documentation in each phase, which can be helpful for teams that need a detailed historical record of project decisions and milestones. Okay, now let's take a look at the pros for Scrum. Flexibility. Agile's iterative process allows for changes and refinements throughout the project. Teams can easily adjust based on evolving needs and feedback. Customer collaboration. Agile emphasizes continuous customer involvement, ensuring that the product is aligned with customer expectations at every stage of development. Early and continuous testing. Testing happens throughout the project, ensuring issues are caught early and every sprint delivers a potentially shippable product. Adaptability to change. Agile is great for projects where requirements are unclear or expected to evolve. The iterative cycles, sprints, mean that changes can be made quickly and easily. Frequent deliverables. With Scrum, teams deliver working software frequently, usually every few weeks, which provides ongoing value to the customer. Now, I want to make note of something here. Now, a lot of the things listed here for pros for Waterfall, it can be true, but I've worked in Waterfall a long time. Way too much time is spent with documentation. It's just a mess of documentation, and what ends up happening is nobody ever goes back and looks at it ever again. So that's just a bunch of time wasted. Now, the other thing is listed here is it talks about defined requirements, and that's true. If it were in the perfect world, nothing changed from beginning to end, I think this would be perfectly fine. In my entire time of working in this industry, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where requirements didn't change. And sometimes, they change because you come upon something expected. Now with Scrum, if you come up upon something expected that you're like, oh my goodness, we didn't even see this requirement coming, but now that we're into it, we can see it. That allows you to adapt to that. Whereas that really isn't the case with Waterfall, because Waterfall is really something where when they speak about waterfall, what you can imagine is you have like a requirements gathering is a waterfall, analysis is a waterfall, design is a waterfall, testing is a waterfall. So each one of those is kind of a piece. If you look at a river, there's waterfalls going down. So let's say that you're in the testing stage and you have this big monolithic application built and you determine, oh my goodness, we bumped up into something here and this is going to be a problem. So now you can imagine that if you're going down that river and you've gone over all these waterfalls, now you have to work your way back to the requirements section. So you have to kind of somehow get over each of those waterfalls and then get back to the requirements and then find your way back again. So it's very difficult to do it at that point. You have to update all the documentation. You have to change all the code. It's very, very problematic when you go into it in a monolithic fashion like that. That's really, when you get down to it, is what Agile is made to resolve. And shown is a pro for waterfall in a way they are, but really when you get down to it, the fact that it never works out that way is exactly why Agile came about to begin with. All right, let's look at the cons to both Waterfall and Scrum. So just like in the last slide, the Waterfall is on the left and the Scrum is on the right. We went over actually a little bit of the details of what I think were the cons starting in the last slide, but let's get into it to go into a little bit more detail. Lack of flexibility. Waterfall is highly rigid. If requirements change after a phase is completed, it can be costly and time consuming to go back and adjust the project. Late testing. Testing typically happens at the end of the project, meaning issues aren't discovered until much later in the process, making them harder and more expensive to fix. Customer feedback is at the end. Customers often don't see the product until the very end of the process, which can lead to dissatisfaction if expectations are not met. Not ideal for complex projects. Projects with high uncertainty or complexity may face difficulties with Waterfall's rigid structure, as requirements often evolve over time. Now let's take a look at the cons for Scrum. It's less predictable. Since requirements and timelines change throughout the project, it can be harder to predict the exact timelines and budgets with Agile. The requirement requires continuous customer involvement. Agile depends on ongoing customer collaboration. If stakeholders are unavailable or disengaged, it can derail the project. Team experience is required. Agile requires highly skilled and experienced teams who can self-organize and work autonomously. Teams need to be disciplined and committed to the Agile process. And then scope creep. Since Agile is adaptable to change, there is a risk of scope creep, where the project may expand beyond the original intent. That's probably the biggest weakness when you get down to it. Now, that and probably cost. You look at where you need customer involvement, and I think it's critical for that regardless, because if you look at Waterfall, one of the biggest problems with Waterfalls is the customer doesn't always see it until the very end, right? So that can cause major issues, and I've seen it where something is developed and then at the end you're like, oh my goodness, this isn't going to work because of this item. Whereas if you're looking at Agile, because of how you have those iterative steps, it's much easier to catch that early and adapt and then fit that into it. I mean, that is probably one of the biggest problems ultimately with a waterfall methodology, is that you don't discover those things at the end. I can't tell you how many times I've encountered where that's ultimately been an issue, and testing kind of falls into that as well. if you find something at the end, sometimes has a bigger impact on your project than you might think. But when that happens, you kind of cross your fingers a little bit, and you're like, when you discover something in testing with Waterfall, you're like, okay, you hope it won't have a bigger cascade effect on everything else. But definitely having the collaboration throughout with the business is a big advantage to Scrum, and it's actually one of the major weaknesses to actually Waterfall. We're now diving into one of the most foundational aspects of Agile development, the Agile Manifesto, which was created in 2001 by a group of software developers who realized that traditional project management methods were no longer keeping up with the fast-paced, ever-changing needs of modern projects. The Agile Manifesto is made up of 4 core values, and it completely shifted the way teams approach work. Let's break this down. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This value places people communication at the center. It means that no matter how fancy your tools are, it's the collaboration and communication between team members that really drive success. Scrum embodies this value by fostering open communication and daily stand ups, retrospectives, planning sessions, ensuring that everyone's voice is heard and that the team works together efficiently. Working software over comprehensive documentation. In traditional project management, we often spend too much time on paperwork, creating detailed documentation before we even begin development. But Agile shifts the focus to delivering real, usable software quickly. Scrum emphasizes delivering a potential shippable product increment at the end of every sprint, making sure you're always delivering value rather than getting bogged down by excessive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Instead of treating customer relationships as a rigid contract where every detail is fixed up front, Agile focuses on ongoing collaboration with the customer. Scrum teams work closely with stakeholders throughout the project, getting feedback regularly and ensuring the product evolves based on real customer needs rather than outdated contract. Responding to change over following a plan. In a world where technology and customer needs change rapidly, following a strict, unchangeable plan can often lead to failure. The Agile mindset embraces change, allowing teams to adapt their approach as new information or challenges arise. In Scrum, the iterative nature of sprints allows teams to assess their progress every couple of weeks and adjust the plan accordingly, ensuring they stay aligned with customer needs and project goals. These 4 values from Agile Manifesto align perfectly with how Scrum operates. Scrum promotes flexible, collaborative teamwork by ensuring that teams can respond to change quickly and effectively, while maintaining close communication with both team and customer. So when we're talking about Scrum being an agile framework, it's not just about managing tasks and running meetings. It's about embodying these values in everything we do as a team. Now, in our next session, we'll take a deeper look at how Scrum ceremonies, roles, artifacts bring these values to life. We'll see you in the upcoming sessions. Thank you so much. So to recap, we went over an introduction to Scrum. We also contrasted it to the most popular non-agile related project management, which is Waterfall. I worked in both Scrum and I worked in Waterfall, and I've adopted agile concepts before Scrum became popular. Um, Waterfall, it lists the advantages related to being able to, if you have a well-defined project, it does, it works for that quite well. But I've never seen a large project where Waterfall has been effective, because the biggest failing I always recall is by the end, when you met with, the business will say, we sometimes we miss the mark by a lot. Other times we maybe didn't miss the mark by quite as much, but it could still have a large impact on the project, and you end up with delays, and it ends up being a mess. Agile really does get around that. The biggest limitation, I guess, with Scrum, as I sit and think of it, is with Waterfall going into it, the business thinks they know what the end point is, because you define all that up front. It's often not the case, because you end up having testing issues, or you may miss the mark on some requirements. Agile, it is a little bit more complicated because of the iterative process, but you can still give an idea of, okay, it's going to be this quarter or that quarter where we think it's going to be. But the good thing is with that, as you're working through it, there is that constant communication. The business is involved, and they always do have an understanding of what the impacts are, and frankly, they'll have an understanding of why it might be delayed. And you know, people are all reasonable. They would rather know, as they're working through it, that, oh my goodness, we missed this and it's going to delay it by 2 sprints or something like that, because everyone can admit that they missed it, rather than coming in at the very end and missing something big and saying, holy cow, now we have to go back and we have to redo a number of things, and it's going to take us maybe 8 weeks in order to resolve this because of the missed requirements. So it really is a much better process, to do Scrum than to do Waterfall. But I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new here, consider subscribing for more technology content just like this. Um, we will have I'm going to go over in Scrum in detail, so look forward to more. When it says content like this, I'm going to go over all the Scrum, and so be expecting additional videos. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below with your biggest takeaway, or let me know what topic you'd like to see next. I'd like to understand, have you worked in Scrum? Have you worked in Waterfall? Are you in the business? Are you in technology? Or just learning this? Let me know below. If you'd like to support this channel, feel free to check out my Buy Me a Coffee. I would really appreciate that. It really helps me to continue to make this content. And before you go, I just want to thank you. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.